You know, Honda's made a name for itself in both road cars and motorsport, with some iconic creations along the way. But every now and then, they build something that's more than just a race car. It becomes a legend. One of those cars is the Honda HSV-010 GT. This car wasn't built for mass appeal, and you can even buy one if you tried. But what makes it so fascinating is how it came out of nowhere, defied the odds, and left a lasting mark in the world of motorsport. This is a story about Honda making the best out of a tough situation. Pulling off a miracle with the Honda HSV-010 GT, the car was born in a time of financial difficulty and rule changes that flipped the Super GT series on its head. But despite all that, it became one of the most beloved machines to ever hit the Japanese racetracks. Let's dig into the story behind this car, its achievements, and why it's still considered one of the wildest creations to ever come out of Honda's factory. To really get what makes the HSV-010 GT so special, you've got to understand Honda's history in motorsport. This is a company that's been racing for decades, racking up wins in everything from Formula 1 to endurance races. But in Japan, one of their biggest arenas has been the Super GT series, especially with the NSX GT. The NSX GT came out of the mid-1990s and was based on the legendary NSX road car. It was Honda's first mid-engine, rear-wheel drive sports car, and it became an icon in the racing world. The NSX GT was known for its incredible handling and balance, thanks to that mid-engine layout. Over the years, it earned a reputation of being fast, reliable, and pretty much unbeatable in the GT 500 class, which is the top-tier category in Super GT. But by 2008, things were changing. The global financial crisis hit, and Honda had to scale back operations, including halting the development of the second-generation NSX, which was supposed to replace the NSX GT. To make matters worse, Super GT introduced new regulations that banned mid-engine cars from the GT 500 class. That effectively made the NSX GT ineligible for competition. Honda suddenly had no car for the 2010 season and had to come up with a solution, and fast. With the clock ticking and no mid-engine cars allowed, Honda's engineers were forced to come up with a front-engine, rear-wheel drive car that could compete in the GT 500 class. And they didn't have years to develop this, just a few months. That's how the Honda HSV-010 GT came to life. HSV, by the way, stands for Honda Sports Velocity. While people often say it was based on the cancelled second-gen NSX, the reality is a bit more complicated. The HSV-010 was more of a brand new design, using some of the lessons from the NSX project, but reimagined to fit the front-engine regulations. What's even crazier is that they managed to field 5 of these cars for the 2010 season, all with different teams. Wheater Honda Racing, Team Kunimitsu Kihin Real Racing, Arta, and Nakajima Racing. Each team got their own HSV-010 GT, and Honda went all in. Even though the car was still pretty fresh off the drawing board, from the outside, the HSV-010 was a beast. It had aggressive lines, wide fenders, and a massive rear wing designed to generate maximum downforce. The aerodynamics were key to keeping the cars glued to the track at high speeds. This wasn't just a car built to fill a gap, it was a car designed to win. Now, let's talk about what really made the HSV-010 GT special. The HR10EG 3.4-liter V8 engine. This was a naturally aspirated engine built from scratch specifically for the GT 500 class, and it wasn't based on any of Honda's existing production engines. This thing could scream all the way up to 10,300 RPM, and even though it wasn't the most powerful engine on the grid in terms of raw horsepower, it was one of the most refined. The HSV-010's V8 produced around 500 horsepower, which is impressive considering its naturally aspirated setup. While other teams in the GT 500 class were using turbocharged engines to get more power, Honda stuck with a naturally aspirated route for a few reasons. One of the main advantages was the linear power delivery. The drivers had more control over the car's acceleration and could better manage their speed coming out of the corners. In a race series where fractions of a second matter, that control was a big deal. The car weighed in at around 2,425 pounds, which was the minimum weight allowed by the regulations. Combined with the V8's smooth power delivery, this made the HSV-010 incredibly nimble, especially on technical tracks like Suzuka or Fuji Speedway. And let's not forget the sound. The exhaust note of the HSV-010 was nothing short of legendary. Fans would pack the stands just to hear that high-pitched scream as the car roared down the straights. It was a visceral experience, something you'd feel in your chest as much as you'd hear it. When the 2010 Super GT season kicks off, no one knew what to expect from the HSV-010 GT. Honda had pulled together in such a short time, and a lot of people thought it might struggle, but the car proved everyone wrong. Right from the start, the Wheater Honda Racing team, with driver Takashi Kogure and Loic Duval, emerged as a dominant force. Over the course of the season, the HSV-010 GT racked up multiple podium finishes, including wins at Suzuka and Fuji. In fact, it was at Suzuka, during one of the most iconic races on the calendar, that the HSV-010 really showed its potential. Suzuka is a tough track, with a mix of high-speed straights and tight technical corners. The HSV-010's balance and handling shined through, helping Wheater Honda Racing to clinch the win. By the end of the season, Wheater Honda Racing had accumulated 82 points, enough to take the GT 500 Team Championship. This was huge for Honda, especially considering how last-minute the car's development had been. The HSV-010 GT wasn't just a stopgap, it was a championship winner. Even though the HSV-010 GT had a dream debut, Honda wasn't about to rest its laurels. Over the next few seasons, they made various tweaks to the car to try and improve its performance. In 2011, one of the more radical changes was the decision to split the radiator into two sections, placing one on each side of the car to improve cooling and weight distribution. Unfortunately, this change didn't work out as planned. The split radiator raised the car's center of gravity, which made it harder to balance and tune. As a result, the car's handling suffered, and Honda reverted to the original single radiator setup by the end of the season. It was a classic case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Honda also continued to tweak the aerodynamics and engine setup over the years. In 2013, they introduced side exit exhausts, allowing the V8 to rev even higher. This gave the car a bit more top-end power, which was crucial in tracks where maintaining high RPMs was the key to quick corner exits. Despite these changes, the HSV-010 GT couldn't quite replicate its 2010 championship winning form, but it remained competitive, with the Kihin Real Racing team finishing second in the 2013 GT500 standings. By 2014, it was clear that the Super GT series was moving toward new regulations that favored cars more closely related to production models. That meant the days of purpose-built race cars like the HSV-010 GT. Honda introduced the NSX Concept GT in 2014, a mid-engine, hybrid-powered machine that would take the company into the next era of Super GT racing. The NSX Concept GT marked the end of the road for the HSV-010, which was no longer eligible under the new regulations. But the HSV-010 had left its mark. In its 4 short seasons, it had won races, taken a championship, and earned a place in the hearts of motorsport fans. In total, the HSV-010 competed in 29 Super GT races, securing 5 wins and 11 podium finishes across its career. Now, this is where it gets interesting for car enthusiasts. The HSV-010 GT was so impressive on the track that people started wondering, what if Honda made a road version of this thing? I mean, think about it. A front-engine, rear-wheel drive Honda supercar with a naturally aspirated V8 that could rev to 10,000 RPM. It could have been a serious rival to Ferraris and Lamborghinis, but the timing wasn't right. Honda was coming out of the financial crisis, and developing a road-legal supercar just didn't make sense at the time. Plus, the HSV-010 was designed for the track, and converting it to meet road safety and emissions regulations would have required extensive engineering. Honda's focus was also shifting to hybrid technology, and they were already deep into developing the NSX hybrid project. There just wasn't room for another high-performance model. Still, fans haven't given up hope. Some have speculated that Honda might one day release a limited edition road-going version of the HSV-010, much like other manufacturers have done with track-focused race cars. But for now, the HSV-010 remains a dream, a what-if scenario that will likely never be realized. Even though it never became a street car, the HSV-010 GT's legacy lives on in Honda's current lineup. The lessons learned from its development and racing career can be seen in cars like the Civic Type R and the NSX GT3. Both of these cars carry the DNA of Honda's motorsport program, with the Civic Type R embodying the front-engine, high-performance spirit of the HSV-010, and the NSX GT3 continuing Honda's tradition of mid-engine race cars. In many ways, the HSV-010 GT represents a turning point for Honda. It bridged the gap between the old-school, naturally aspirated machines of the past and the hybrid-powered road-based race cars of today. The innovations Honda developed with the HSV-010, particularly in aerodynamics and chassis design, paved the way for future successes in both motorsport and production cars. What makes the HSV-010 GT story so fascinating is that it perfectly encapsulates Honda's ability to think outside the box. When they were forced to ditch the NSX and scramble to build a front-engine race car, they didn't just slap something together. They took the opportunity to innovate. The result was a car that defied expectations and proved that Honda could adapt, innovate, and dominate, even when the odds were stacked against them. This kind of ingenuity has defined Honda's racing efforts for decades. Whether it's Formula 1, MotoGP, or Super GT, Honda has always been a company willing to take risks and push the boundaries of what's possible. The HSV-010 GT is just one example, but it's a prime one that shows how Honda can turn adversity into triumph. So, what do you think? Would you have liked to see a street version of the HSV-010 GT? And what about this car makes it so special to you? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories about more fascinating cars in automotive history.